Welcome to the All Eers podcast, powered by HD Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome into the latest edition of the All Eers podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Kennedy. Thank you all for joining us. However you may be listening to us, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as well. Links to those are in the description, along with all of our social media channels as well. We are in the midst of baseball season. We are entering the final week of the regular season, with next week being the Big 12 tournament out west in Arizona. But with that being said, we have one final series in Morgantown, which is against the TCU Horned Frogs, coming up this weekend, starting on Thursday, ending on Saturday. And we will have coverage of that on Saturday by going to our website, wvgazettemail.com. And WVU is coming off a weekend series victory, series sweep, as I should say, in a very prolific way, winning Game 3 over the Kansas Jayhawks to take the series 13-2, and an important game. And according to Division I Baseball, they released their standings and rankings on Monday, and WVU moved up into the top 10, number 9 nationally, according to D1 Baseball. But when you think of Mountaineer baseball, from where this program is now compared to where this was just a couple of years ago, the head coach of the Mountaineers, Randy Mazey, was the architect in a lot of ways in getting this program into a national relevance. And we are pleased to be joined by the former head baseball coach, Coach Randy Mazey. Coach, welcome to the program.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, let's kind of talk about the now before we go back in time, because I do want to spend a lot of time on that. But, you know, obviously Coach Steve Savins coached alongside you in Morgantown for a number of years before assuming the head coaching role with WVU. Your thoughts right now? Obviously, again, as I mentioned, top 10 nationally, according to Division I Baseball, just came off a very, very big series sweep against the Kansas Jayhawks over the weekend, who was also in the top 10. Your thoughts right now with where WVU baseball is at, excitement level as well, where are you at?
Yeah, back in the top 10. I don't, I'd have to go back and look, but I remember might have been 2019 or somewhere back then, maybe even after that, we got up to 6th in the nation at one point, and I thought that was pretty cool. But they're playing really good right now, back in the top 10. I don't know how long it's been, but very, very well deserved, coming off a great weekend, and they actually have a great team this year and are playing as good right now as they have all season. So very exciting to have the Mountaineers back in the top 10. But you kind of chuckle when you say it, because if anybody out there is listening that was following the program when we got here in 2013, if I would have said, 12 years from now we will have been in the top 10 a couple of those years, they probably would have laughed at me and gave me some sort of medication. I don't know what it would call for, but really, really hard to believe it's come so far in such a short period of time.
Yeah, along that line, obviously with where this program was in 2013, whenever you guys were playing over at Holly Field, to now in that beautiful facility at Kendrick Family Ballpark, just from where this program was when you first assumed the role in 2013 to where this is now that we're talking in 2026, how far has this program come? But also, how encouraging is it just to see the buy-in from certain university officials to understand the importance of this program, but also just to continue to reinvest into this program?
Yeah, it was I don't know how many people know the story, but when I interviewed with Oliver Luck, when I came up for my interview, whenever that was, he didn't tell me at the time that we're either going to hire a coach or drop the program. He told me after the fact that they considered dropping the program at that time when we were getting into the Big 12, and he reached out to some baseball people and said, hey, do you even think it's possible for us to compete in the Big 12? And there was a couple people that talked them into keeping the program, and that's kind of where it starts. The administration has to buy in. They're the ones that make the decision to invest in the resources and the people to make it go. You just have to invest in the right resources and the right people. And when I got here on my interview, Oliver basically said, I don't know anything about baseball. All I know is we're getting into a good conference, and I've got plans to build you a big facility, but other than that, I don't know a thing about it. So I need somebody that can run this thing. So here's my crazy rear end that loves to accept the challenge. So I was like, heck yeah, let's do this thing. It's looking from the outside in, you kind of knew if the administration would buy in that this program had a chance. To say we'd be in the top 10 a couple times since then, I don't know that anybody envisioned that, but you knew it had a chance to be really good, just didn't know how good.
When you look at this year's team, before we go back in time again, when you look at this team, and obviously you've probably been paying close attention to this just in a lot of different realms, but with where this team's at now, at this point in the season, entering its final series of the regular season, entering postseason play next week, what do you think has been the catalyst for this year's program to allow it to have amounted to so much success entering the regular series finale?
They've pitched really well. Max Yale, who's one of the holdover guys that I coached in my last year, is just, if there's a better left-handed pitcher in the United States, I'd like to see him. He's just been phenomenal this year. And Chance and Cole transfer from Newberry down in South Carolina. He's had a tremendous year. Had we not got sent to the regional in Clemson last year, we may not have Chance and Cole because he's from right down there and came to watch us play in the regional. And Ian Korn, the Division II Pitcher of the Year from right up the road. Dawson Montesa, another Division II guy. Those four guys have combined to start most of the games on the weekends, and they're pitching as good now as they have all season. So you can't win championships without really good starting pitching, and we sure have gotten it.
One final question about the now before we go back. Going back a couple of weeks, I know people probably still have a bitter taste in their mouth from this game, but that thumping that WVU had just a couple of weeks ago against Pitt, losing 23-1, do you think that was a wake-up call in a lot of ways for this team to understand if they wanted to get to where they're at today or even have postseason aspirations to make it deep into the NCAA tournament? Do you think that Pitt loss and the way that they lost was a wake-up call in a lot of ways?
I don't necessarily think it was a wake-up call. If you play enough games over the course of the season, you play 60 games, there's going to be games where you blow somebody out. There's going to be games where somebody blows you out. There's going to be weekends where you sweep people and weekends where you got a chance of being swept. You play in all kinds of games, and the law of averages dictates that you're going to play just about every kind of game you can. There's going to be extra inning games at home and extra inning games on the road. You just have to learn how to play in a lot of different varieties. And I think the Pitt game was a catalyst because it gave them a chance to get some of the guys who had been playing every day, every inning of every game, get them out of the game and give them a rest. And that's one thing that people underestimate, the value of rest, because these kids get tired over the course of the game. And, in that game, didn't have to throw any of our high leverage relievers and got the starters out of the game in the fourth inning, and they got to watch the other people play. And that goes a long way. You look at all the other sports and you have to tap into your depth, if you want to be good. I'm a hockey fan, and the third line in hockey, most of their role is to give the first line a rest because they can't play all the time. So that's what depth on the team does. And if you ever have a chance to get guys like that in a game, there's a benefit to that. I hate that we had to lose to Pitt for that to happen, but since that time we've played pretty well, and I think that has a lot to do with it.
You a Penguins fan?
I grew up a Maple Leafs fan, but you get so tired of not making the playoffs. You kind of gravitate toward. I like watching the Penguins. What Sidney Crosby has done for hockey, and not only Pittsburgh, but even far-reaching down into Morgantown, is just people don't understand how many kids that he has single-handedly got into the sport of hockey with what he's done. So I just love watching that guy play. He does things that other people can't do. He's just amazing. I just love watching people that are so far ahead of everybody else in their profession. That's fun for me to watch.
Now, are you more of a? This is how I am with baseball. Are you more of a fan going and seeing it in person compared to TV?
You know what? I probably so.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to my wife last night. We were watching a documentary about a boxing match, and she's like, "Would you ever want to go to a boxing match?" And I said, "No, it's so much better on TV. You know, I don't understand in boxing why the first 5 rows are below the ring. You have to look up at a boxing match. Every other sport, you don't have to look up at. But you know, I can appreciate watching UFC and boxing on TV, but you know, hockey is something it's great to be in person for, and all the sports. It's great to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I love the atmospheres as much as anything, and being outside and you know, hearing the sounds and the stuff that you don't get on TV. So I love attending in person. But you know, with a guy like Crosby, you know, if you're watching him in person, sometimes he does things so fast you can't even tell what the heck happened. So it's good to have the replays on TV to appreciate what some people do.
Now, I understand you've been to a couple of WVU baseball games. Do you kind of get that itch whenever you go to these games? Like, man, I'd love to be back out there. Are you at that point in retirement where you're just like, I'm glad I'm retired now?
I don't know if that itch is coming, but I haven't felt that itch in the last couple of years. So, but I really I'm a fan of college baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And as everybody knows, I love the Mountaineers and love the state of West Virginia. And it's been so nice to sit in the stands and watch. I haven't been on the field for a practice. My number one goal is to stay out of the coach's way when I'm around. But I rarely miss a practice. You know, I'll be out there tomorrow watching the inter-squad game probably. And it helps that my son's on the team too. You know, I get to see him play. So, but no, I love watching from the stands. And heck, if I'm at a game and in the third inning things aren't going well, I just go get a beer. You know, and I've never been able to do that before. That's pretty enjoyable.
So what kind of beer choice are we talking here? Are we talking like a Blue Moon, a Michelob Ultra? What are we talking here?
You know, there's really only 2 kinds of beer I like to drink. It's warm beer and cold beer.
Amen to that. I heard that. That sounds like a man of the people answer. You know that's why you're so beloved. You're a man of the people, especially in West Virginia. You know how West Virginians are with their beer. You're a man of the people.
I wasn't like that till I moved to this state. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to everybody out there for welcoming me with open arms.
Open arms and a full glass of beer as well, warm or cold. Well, one final question before we take a break here. You mentioned your son Weston playing for the Mountaineers. What's that like for you? Whenever you do see him run around there out in the diamond, either warming up or in a game, what's that like for you as a dad, being able to see your son play college baseball that you've had so much time spent in? What's that like for you?
You know, it's amazing. That's, to be honest with you, that was a lot of reason why I retired, is because I missed so much of his stuff and my daughter Sierra's stuff in this profession, because you're always traveling, and I wanted to retire and watch my children while I still could and while they were still active. And I always wanted to coach my son, but I didn't want him to be coached by me. So when the opportunity arose to be coached by the guys that are in place now, the guys on the staff, I thought, well, here's the perfect storm. I get to watch my kids and they're going to develop and around the people that I'm familiar with, and hopefully, you know, down the road, he'll make a pretty big impact in this program. But since I retired, I didn't miss any of his high school baseball games his senior year, and I didn't miss any of my daughter's hockey games her last couple of years. And had I not retired, I would have never gotten to do that. And that's been you can't replace time. You know, you can find ways to make more money and do that, but you can't replace watching your kids in their final seasons. And my daughter is going to play hockey in college up at Chatham University in Pittsburgh, so I'll get to see her continue her hockey career. So again, without without the retirement thing, I'd never gotten to do that. And it's been well worth it along those lines.
We're talking with former WVU head baseball coach Randy Mazey here. We're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about his time as the Mountaineer head coach's leader from 2013 to 2024, and we'll talk more with Coach Mazey here on the other side of this break. This is the All Ears Podcast.
As the game gets faster, stronger, more dynamic, your equipment has to keep up. Introducing the Riddell Axiom, the next evolution in football protection, designed to match the speed and strength of today's athlete. Contact West Virginia Riddell representative Casey Turley at 304-552-5960. Gear up, play smart, stay protected.
HD Media Sports is your one-stop destination for top high school and college sports coverage in the Mountain State. From Morgantown to Mingo County, our award-winning reporters keep you informed about your favorite teams and players, including exclusive coverage of the Marshall Thundering Herd and the West Virginia Mountaineers. Follow HD Media Sports on Facebook to stay up to date on the latest news, features, and game coverage.
Welcome back into the All Ears Podcast. We're chatting with former Mountaineer head coach, skipper, whatever you want to call him. Hey, he's a man of the people, as we said in that last segment. Head coach Randy Mazey. And Coach, talking about your time in Morgantown and from where this program was just whenever you entered the program in 2013 and to where it ended in 2024, you just look back. Do you ever take a moment where you just kind of just like sit back, you soak in all the memories that you guys accumulated, all the success that you guys racked up, accolades, the regular season Big 12 title not too long ago, the regional in 2019. I mean, do you ever kind of just sit back sometimes and just soak in everything that was accomplished in your time in Morgantown?
Yeah, I catch myself doing that occasionally, and actually did it this weekend. Another beauty of retirement is that I can go to I went to a wedding of a former player this past weekend, Marcus Inman, who was a good player on the 2019 team where we hosted the regional, and get down there and it's amazing and I've been to maybe 4 former players' weddings here recently, and every time you go to a player's wedding, the entire wedding party are other players. And that just shows you how close guys get when they play on a college baseball team together. And get down there, and Darius Hill's down there, and Shane Ennis and Jackson Kramer and Andrew Zeitel and guys like that. And you just you get to tell them stories, about, hey, can you believe we did this or we did that? And that brings back memories. And I was at the Pitt game the other day, and it was one of the biggest crowds in the history of the ballpark, and people were saying, can you believe how far it's come? And, it kind of forces you to go back and remember the days at Holly Field when people were climbing the pine trees out behind the outfield fence to watch the game. And, the field was in bad shape, and the kids were getting dressed in the parking lots. And now the facilities are incredible. And, back in the day, we had put an ad in the student newspaper for student managers because they're so helpful to a program. And came to practice that day, and one kid showed up and walked up to me, and I said, hey, how you doing? And he said, good. I said, are you here for a student manager position? And he said, well, I guess so. I didn't know where I was going. I think he was lost. He didn't answer the ad. He just showed up, and we took him on as a student manager. And now our student manager program, they had to make cuts this year and only keep like 35 of them. And they are so helpful to a program, and 5 or 6 of them have gotten jobs in professional baseball through our student manager program. And it's just amazing. Every aspect of the program has come so far. The facility that we raise money for, the bio-precision and biomechanics facility that Ken Kendrick was so instrumental in helping us build. Nobody has a facility, standalone facility as good as that in the country. And what a recruiting tool. And the program's just going to continue to get better because of the resources and the investment. And we sell out. Every home game has been sold out for the last couple of years. So It's amazing. The problem, though, when we played at Holly Field, the advantage of playing at Holly Field is the teams that came in and played against us hated playing there. It was a terrible atmosphere. It was a bad playing surface. And I remember Augie Garrido getting off the bus at Texas and walking around the corner and looking at it. And he turned around and got back on the bus. He said, I can't believe I'm putting my team here. And nobody ever played good when they came here. But now you put them in a great facility with a great crowd and you get their A game. So there's advantages and disadvantages, but it's just amazing. I'm so proud of the people and the fans in the state of West Virginia. And now on ESPN Plus, you can watch every game, which is what I did this weekend. I was guilty. I'll apologize to Marcus Inman, my former player right now. I actually had the game on. I didn't have the volume on, but I had the game on during his wedding ceremony on Saturday. But those guys understand. But I can't be more thankful to the people of West Virginia and how my wife and I have become ingrained in this community, in this state, and how welcoming everybody has been.
So you mentioned the player aspect side of things, especially now being retired, attending a few weddings since being retired. You have 8 former players of yours that played at WVU that are now playing in the major leagues, and obviously it starts with J.J. Weatherholt and what he's amounted to early on with the St. Louis Cardinals. Obviously John Means and what he's done throughout his baseball career. Alek Manoah got his first crack back in the MLB since a few years ago, actually pitched against his former team, the Blue Jays, over the weekend, pitched 1 inning, 1 strikeout. But seeing your former players go on to play in the MLB and have success that they did early on, you talk about, again, going back to Manoah, he was an AL Cy Young candidate in one of his early years in the MLB with the Blue Jays. But just seeing your former players amount to the success that they have so far in the MLB, what does that mean to you in the grand scheme of things? Knowing them now compared to where they were in college, what does that mean to you?
You know, it's amazing. You know, so fun to watch those guys. And you know that, you know, when they come here, you try and convince the guys that I know what your dream is. You want to play in Major League Baseball. Please accept my help. I'm here to help you achieve your dreams because I know what they are. So it's really cool to watch those guys live out their dreams. But, you know, like I said, I think I've coached 25 or 26 players that have played Major League Baseball, but I've coached probably 2,500 that haven't played Major League Baseball. And I get as much satisfaction out of going to Marcus Inman's wedding. Marcus is a plumber, and that's so satisfying for me. He was a policeman for a couple of years. He met a beautiful young lady, and she didn't want him to risk his life every day, so he became a plumber, and now he's so happy. And I get as much satisfaction out of that, watching him say his vows and interact with his in-laws. And because toward the end of my career, I really gravitated towards teaching guys the skills that they're going to use the rest of their life, not just during their baseball career. You know, when you're a young coach and got a little bit of crazy in you, you know, you're all about teaching them how to steal bases and hit homers and field ground balls. But toward the end of your career, you just realize that there are other lessons that are way more important, like how to be a good teammate and how to be a leader and a father and a coworker. And you end up teaching that more than you do the other stuff and getting more satisfaction out of watching them accomplish all that stuff. So just to go and see what these former players are doing. One of them works in the IT department, and one of them is trying to get into athletic administration. And those stories are just as cool for me as the major leaguers. You know, everybody sees the big leaguers, and nobody really follows the careers of the plumbers and the IT guys, but I sure do, because that means a lot more to me than how far you can hit a baseball or how hard you can throw it.
the relationship side of things with your players, from where you started as a coach at Clemson in the early 90s to where you concluded at WVU, how much did you harp on the relationship side of things with your players, and where did that originate from? Because obviously that's something that I think coaches develop over time, and you could probably attest to that. But where does that originate from, and how did your philosophy in that grow in the years that you were coaching college baseball?
Well, I played for a guy when I was a player at Clemson that was really, really hard on me and really, really hard on everybody else. And a lot of guys didn't like him for it. He would motivate you by telling you can't do something. And at the time, it makes you so mad and you just want to knock his teeth out for it. But all of a sudden, 10 years later, all of a sudden you start appreciating that stuff. And if it wasn't for him telling me I couldn't do it, I probably wouldn't have done it. And you talk to all the other former players that didn't like him when they played for him, and after the fact, all they can say is, "Man, I appreciate how hard you were on me." And I was hard on some guys because I wanted to challenge guys and get the most out of them. And I've been to a couple of reunions this year of former teams, and they laugh about the stories that they would tell and how hard I was on guys. And these are the guys that I still stay in touch with because I was so hard on them. Because as I tell them, it was all done out of love, man. I was hard on you because I believed in you, and that's the part they don't get at the time. They get that part a little bit later. But this world was all about relationships. When they put my tombstone up at the end of my time, my only thing is, don't you dare put up there how many games I won, because I could literally care less. I don't even know the number. I don't know if it's 200 or 800. So it means nothing to me at this point, but it means a lot to me that I have relationships with the kids that I coached, whether they played in the big leagues or not.
I want to go back. We could talk about games upon games upon games, as I love doing with coaches a lot of times. But I want to talk about that 2019 regional. I don't want to talk about the outcome of it. I want to talk about the importance that it had on the program at the time, because it was the first regional hosted by WVU in a long time. I think it was like 1955 when it was played over on the Evansdale field, as the last time West Virginia had hosted an NCAA tournament game. But the importance of that, how much went into that season, how magical that was. You could talk about Alec Manola as well and what he amounted to at WVU. But to see how far the program came from 2013 to then hosting a regional 6 years later at Kendrick Family Ballpark there in Morgantown, the importance of that and seeing everything that you put into, whether it be your time, your effort, your blood, sweat, and tears, whatever it may be, seeing all of that come into fruition in 2019, what will you recall, or what will you remember about that time period of your career when you look back on that 10 to 20 years from now?
Yeah, that's what changed this program, really. When you host a regional and people start coming to games that have never been to games before, and they just come just because you're hosting a postseason event and maybe had never been to a Mountaineer game before, and they come and see what kind of product we're putting on the field and the excitement and the atmosphere, and that's what really changed the program completely. And it's a credit to the guys that were on that team, the Manolas and Darius Hill and Pudge behind the plate, and all the guys that played on those teams that put this program on the map. And now all those people that came to that regional that we hosted, now they're buying season tickets and coming to games and getting other people to buy season tickets. And that's what propelled this program forward. And, that was a very interesting regional. I think our kids felt so much pressure by hosting because we represent, an entire state, that we didn't play as well that weekend as we would have, because we were so unfamiliar in that atmosphere. But the positives definitely outweigh the negatives because we didn't win that regional. And when I looked around and saw the crowd that in that second game when we were playing Duke, I didn't get to watch the end of that game. I got thrown out of the game in the second or third inning, but just wanted to give the fans some excitement. So go out there and have a big argument with an umpire, even though I knew I was wrong, just to get people into the game. And I didn't like the way the game was going, and thought we needed something to change to have a chance to win that thing. So we had a lot of people in the stands watching that game, and I wasn't one of them.
When you talk about the significance of that, just continuing along that, and you mentioned how your players might have felt a little bit of pressure, excuse me, how your players probably felt a little bit of pressure with that game and in that time frame, representing not only the program but also the state, I think is something that I appreciate so much about coaches, whether it be before, now, or in the future, is when you talk with, Ross Hodge, for example, Mark Kellogg, Rich Rodriguez, you can go down the list with the current guys, that always seems to get brought up. And whenever you're recruiting guys, is that something that gets brought up initially, or is that something that maybe in the next couple of interviews or next couple of discussions that you have with a recruit, that's like, hey, just so you're aware, you're not just playing for a university, you're playing for a whole frickin' state?
No, we bring it up right away. It's with social media now. Every time I would do an interview when I was coaching, I made sure and say how much we play for the people in this state. And if you came to West Virginia while I was coaching, you kind of knew how I felt about it before you got here. But we have we had a creed when I was coaching in our program that talked about how we represent our entire state and our university. So we kind of threw it in their face because it is so important. No other school has the advantage that we have as far as playing for an entire state. So it's important, and I want my job was to marry those two entities, the people of the state and the players on the team, and let the people that live in West Virginia appreciate the players, and let the players appreciate the people that live in West Virginia. And I think we've done that. And, we would make every guy individually sing Country Roads in front of the team all by himself leading up to the season. And they think it's kind of dumb when you do it by yourself in front of the team. But when they're standing on that foul line after a big win and all sing it together, then they can start appreciating it. And that's kind of the thing that, that sticks out after they leave here. Every wedding I've ever attended of a former player, it never fails. The last song of the reception is either Country Roads or Sweet Caroline, without fail, every single time. And all the West Virginia people in attendance at the wedding are singing it loud and proud. And it's such a unique feeling. And that was the reason, my son grew up in this program as the bat boy and the kid in the dugout. And when he actually made his commitment to West Virginia, and I didn't force him to do that, but I asked him why he wanted to play here. He said, I want to go to practice every day knowing that I'm representing the entire state. And so he gets it, and my goal as a coach was to make all the other kids get it. And I think we've really done a good job of that.
When you talk about Hollyfield and the historical aspect of that's a field that still gets brought up when talking about the historical lineage of Mountaineer Field, or not Mountaineer Field, Mountaineer baseball. And you talked about these different programs coming in and hating playing there. Did you ever kind of use that to your own advantage? Because I know sometimes whenever there's like a hollow piece of a floor in basketball, coaches are always like, force your guy here and make sure whenever he dribbles, that hits that spot right on the head. Do you ever did you ever kind of use Hollyfield to your all's advantage at all?
Oh, of course we did. I mean, we didn't really have to because they knew. It's hard to get a team excited to play in an atmosphere that's not a great atmosphere. And old Hollyfield was. It was funny because I had to share a restroom with the fans. The only restroom in the whole place was behind the little concession stand there. So in the sixth inning, if I had to pee, I'd walk back there, and you wouldn't believe some of the conversations I'd have with the fans at the urinal during the game. Hey, coach, why'd you bunt there? That type of thing. And I thought, well, I can enjoy this because I'm meeting fans, but I don't know if the other coaches are really going to enjoy this. So let's just keep this going as long as we can. So it was great because everybody can appreciate where this program started, and we were actually proud to play there, because I know so many players before had played there. So we were proud to play there, but at the same time, it was nice to get a nice new facility where the coaches had their own restrooms in the dugout too.
What got you into coaching? I know you had a long tenured coaching career dating back to your time at Clemson, but what got you into coaching? Or I guess a better question is, who got you into coaching?
My dad had coached me growing up, and then when I went to college, the old dude that I played for that I told you about, he was he was a mentor of mine. And when I finished playing, I signed with the Cleveland Indians in 1988. Yes, I said the Cleveland Indians in 1988 because that's who I played for. But when I got done playing, and all of a sudden you wonder what you're going to do, I got released from baseball on Mother's Day, 1989. So just celebrated that anniversary. But your first thought is, what in the world am I going to do now? But I had my college degree at the time. And I went back and called my old coach, and he invited me back to be on his staff because he knew I had a pretty good feel for the game based on what my dad had taught me. And so I worked for him for several years and then got a full-time job, and he mentored me into got my first head coaching job at age 27. I was the youngest Division I coach in the country at age 27 when I went to Charleston Southern, and just kept chasing opportunities and going places that needed help at the time, which was kind of my niche in my profession. Go somewhere that needs help them, get them where they need to be, and then go to the next one. And that's what I did at every stop along the way. And you feel pretty good about what you accomplished at the places you were at. And West Virginia is no exception. I feel really good about what we accomplished while I was here, and turned it over to the right people because I knew who the right people were at the time, and they're continuing to get better.
You mentioned a really interesting word there in that last answer, and you mentioned an A word. It was the ambition side of things and being ambitious in what you were doing. Do you think that is a quality that some coaches nowadays don't really harness in on whenever they are trying to find opportunity, regardless of sport? I know we're talking college baseball or just baseball in general, but do you feel that with a lot of coaches, especially a lot of younger coaches, that ambition or that ambitiousness to succeed or even just continue to sniff the surface of excellence, do you think that's something that's continuing to grow, or is that something where you feel there are some out there that may not truly understand or harness that trait?
Yeah, I don't know. The world's changing, as we all know, and kids are changing, and it's hard to be the same person trying to start out in a career that you started out in 30 years ago. A lot of you had to pay your dues back in the day, and I don't know that kids like paying dues anymore like we did back in the day. If you want to become a coach now, coaches are finally starting to get paid for what they do, but that doesn't happen right away. You gotta be a volunteer or pay your dues for 10 or 20 years before you can make a living at it these days. And I don't know that kids want that now. When I was still coaching and I hired a young coach to work a baseball camp or do anything, I didn't care about their baseball ability. I wanted to see if an old man like myself is out raking dirt on the mound, at age 57, are any of these young kids going to say, "Hey, coach, give me that rake. You don't need to be doing that." Who wants to work these days, and who wants to do it without caring about how much money they make? Those are the guys that make it. When I had just turned 40 years old. My son was on the way, and I signed a contract as a top assistant at TCU for $38,500 as a 40-year-old. And he just made it work. I mean, I was under that umbrella of restricted earnings coaches when I was at Clemson. And that rule was you couldn't make more than $16,000 a year from anywhere. And you just made it work because you weren't chasing money. You just chased opportunities. And these days, somebody, it seems like they'll take a lesser opportunity for an extra $5,000. And they just don't understand that you have to pay dues. And if you just continue to chase the right opportunity, then it'll pay off in the long run. But kids want to know, what can you do for me now? And it's hard to find those old school, put your head down and grind type of kids that are really successful in this profession. But, I don't think that's confined to coaching or baseball. I just think that's the way of the world these days. So, you just got to adapt with the times,
Absolutely. Well, one final question for you. I know we've bounced around a lot, but one of the big topics that people continue to discuss in regards to college athletics is just this ever-changing world with, it seems, little to no answers in regards to changing what's happened recently with name, image, and likeness and the transfer portal and everything. One, where's your head at with the new world of collegiate athletics? And two, do you feel that what's been occurring across all sports in college is the right path, or is it still undetermined as to where this outcome could last or could lead to, I should say?
The one thing about college athletics in the last 5 years, there's been so much change that it's hard to keep up with. I don't know that you can expect anything to stay the same over the next 5 or 10 years as they have been. So it's always going to be ever changing, but you can't have progress without change either. The worst thing you could ever say to somebody, and I heard this a bunch when I first got here, when I'd ask about something, they'd say, "Well, that's just the way we've always done it." And that's the kiss of death if you want to keep doing things the way you've always done it. And that's the way to stymie your progress instead of making progress. So you have to have change and you have to have vision. And that's why Oliver and Luck and I had such a great relationship, because we were both outside the box thinkers and visionaries and looking into the future, what this program could be instead of what it was. But, with the NIL and the transfer portal, when that first came along, I'd say the percentage of the people out there, 90% were against it, maybe even more. This is going to be the ruination of college athletics, and I can't believe this, and this stinks. And we used it to our advantage. It was, while everybody else was saying that, we tried to jump ahead of it and say, hey, if this is going to be a thing, let's use it to our advantage. And I think we did jump ahead of it. And without the transfer portal and the NIL, the Mountaineers don't win the Big 12 the last couple of years, or play in a couple super regionals and have a chance to do it again this year. the transfer portal and the NIL has been a blessing to our program. I don't know how it's worked everywhere else, but I know for us, without that, we wouldn't have the success we're having. The problem with all that stuff is we're not giving these kids the actual reality of how life works. You know, they get at the end of the season and they hit 230 and come in my office and want some NIL money. And I'm like, well, you don't understand how it works. As we had a meeting the first day of the season when the NIL was a thing, and I told the team, I was like, well, here's the NIL, here's how it works. It's basically turned into a professional model. And if you look at the New York Yankees team, there are guys on the Yankees team that are making more money than other guys on the Yankees team. And the guys that are making more money are the better players. So if you want more NIL money, go hit 400 like J.J. Weatherholt did last year, and I'll give you NIL money. But don't go hit, 212 and come in and say, I need some money or I'm going to transfer. Because I'm going to teach you what life is about if you ask me that question. Because in adulthood, you can't have a bad year at your profession and think you're going to get a raise. So the problem is these kids that are getting all this money are getting a false sense of what life is going to be like after they stop throwing a football or shoot 3-pointers. They're just getting a false sense of reality, which I hate because, like I said, I'm more about life lessons than I am sports lessons. So it's been great to us. Ken Kendrick has been phenomenal, and Oliver Luck and those guys were phenomenal and jumping on board with us when this whole NIL thing started. And like I said, they invested for us and we did the right things. And now all of a sudden, we're talking about the Mountaineers being in the top 10 again. So it's been a blessing. So I love it and hate it at the same time.
Well, my friend, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you. It was great chatting with you and going down memory lane. And hopefully we could talk a little bit more down the road. And hopefully the Mountaineers get to win a couple more games and be able to be in the mix for another regional. So appreciate your time and thank you for everything.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Any opportunity I can get to say hello to the people of West Virginia that have been so important to me, I like to take advantage of it. So if you're out there listening, West Virginians, I appreciate everything you did for me.
Absolutely. There he is. Former WVU head baseball coach Randy Mazey. Again, the Mountaineers will take on the TCU Horned Frogs this weekend in a 3-game series to conclude the regular season before beginning Big 12 Conference tournament play out west in Arizona, and then the NCAA tournament coming up just in a couple of weeks. Break to take here. We're going to be joined by former Charleston Gazette-Mail sports editor Mitch Vingle as we discuss our top 3 greatest WVU football victories of all time. This is the All Ears Podcast.
HD Media Game Day is your streaming home for the best in live high school sports across West Virginia. Featuring football, basketball, soccer, and more, HD Media Game Day brings the action to you for free, exclusively on our YouTube channel and at hdmediagameday.com. When you can't make it to the game, HD Media Game Day has you covered.
Oh, good gravy. The kind made from real premium sausage. The kind that's smothered over deliciousness. The kind you can only get at Tudor's Biscuit World. That's the gravy that's oh so good. It's the perfect topping to your biscuits or your taters and even makes a delicious side. It's oh so good gravy. Tudor's Biscuit World. We're dripping with oh good gravy.
Final segment here of the All Ears Podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Kennedy. Thank you all for joining us. However you may be listening to us, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as well. Be sure to check out all the links to those in our description as well. You can follow me on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7 and on Facebook as well at HD Media Sports, Twitter, Gazmo Sports as well. Again, links in the description moving forward. Well, we've been on the theme. We've been on the topic, I guess you could say the general topic of WVU football over the last several weeks with former Charleston Gazette-Mail sports editor Mitch Vingle. And Mitch brought up a really good point whenever we were doing our highly private, I guess you could say, pre-production meeting a couple days ago, and we were talking about what we were wanting to discuss, and Mitch brought up a really good point, and I think a lot of this gets brought up during the offseason, deservedly so, because whenever people are trying to figure out something to talk about, what's the one thing that everybody loves talking about? Winning. And I think Mitch and I have talked about that before, and whether it be basketball, whether it be football, whatever it may be sport-wise, people love talking about winning. So let's talk about some wins. So what we're doing is we're going to bring in Mitch Vingle, former Charleston Gazette Mail sports editor and WVU beat writer. We're going to give our top 3 WVU football victories of all time. So let's welcome Mitch in. Mitch, welcome to the program, my friend.
Thanks, buddy. This is going to be fun. This one is going to be fun because I am sure after sitting down and doing this that we will not agree at all. And that makes it even more fun, I think. And honestly, Taylor, this was harder than I thought. You know, we said the top wins, and I'm sitting down and I'm looking at all the ones that, you know, mostly that I've covered, been through. And, you know, I thought I kind of have to split this into categories because to me there are two types of top wins. One was the most fun and one was most significant. The significance, which the ones I'll call ultimately the top, quote unquote. But if you want me to go ahead,
yeah, do your fun ones first. I'm interested with your fun ones before we get to the serious ones.
The most fun for sure that I've been to and seen. The number one most fun one for me was when West Virginia beat Georgia in the 2006 Sugar Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it kind of changed the perception of W football. 21-0 West Virginia in the first quarter, then 28-0 before Georgia came roaring back. I mean, we were sitting there. I was working with Dave Hickman at the time, and I'm looking at him. He's looking at me, and we're just like going, oh, my God, is this really happening? You know, Pat White, Steve Slayton against the SEC, you know, and kind of legitimized Rich Rodriguez spread. The Phil Brady fake punt, I even tweeted the other day that I still think that's the greatest play call of all time in W history. I mean, before the game, W was respected, but afterwards, you know, the Mountaineers were feared. Number 2, most fun was W 70, Clemson 33 in the 2012 Orange Bowl. Just unbelievable what happened there. You know, Geno Smith, 404 yards and 6 touchdowns. Tavon, Stedman Bailey, Darwin Cook with a 99-yard fumble return. You know, that was top 15 Clemson team. Set an Orange Bowl record. I mean, it wasn't just a win; it was a national statement, and we thought they were going to be off and rolling. You know, it didn't really prove that way, but and then number 3, most fun for me was W in Oklahoma in the 2008 Fiesta Bowl. That was the Bill Stewart game after Rich Rodriguez left. Oklahoma was, you know, Bob Stoops heavily favored, but then, you know, you had Steve Slayton with the hammy and Noel Devine in, and that was the Owen Schmidt runaway beer truck game. I mean, it just didn't get more fun than that after the crushing loss to Pitt, you know, weeks earlier, and kind of restored pride, I guess you would say, and proved, yeah, W did belong in the conversation with the elite. Now, most significant, this is where, you know, I guess I would have to land on if we're going to say the top, and this, I'm sure you're definitely going to disagree with it. But for me, number 1 was when W beat Penn State in Morgantown in 1988, 51-30. It legitimized that undefeated season because a little history before that, back in 1984, BYU was named the national champion, and nobody really bought it. And I think people were thinking of W in the same vein at that time. So they needed this street cred, if you will, on the way to the Fiesta Bowl to play Notre Dame. And we know that how that turned out. Major Harris got hurt and kind of everything fell apart after that. But to get to that national championship game, which is the only time West Virginia has ever done so, you had to have that impressive win over Penn State, the finally game, a lot of people call it, because of, the scoreboard saying finally beat Penn State. I went through a million, it seems like, thumpings covering WVU, by Penn State. So that to me was number one. Number two was W41, Oklahoma 27 in Norman in 1982. That kick-started Don Nehlen's program. That kick-started all the good seasons, I think, that followed. They were down 14-0 against Barry Switzer and his, powerhouse program. They were the Alabama at the time, and it was victory kind of heard around college football. I remember, being in Beckley at the time, and it was just like a sonic boom. Jeff Hofstetter had 4 touchdowns. They recovered an onside kick. Darryl Talley had a 100-degree fever, but still stuffed the wishbone. That was just, like I said, it was kind of like a sonic boom across the, college football, not only for West Virginia. And then number 3, I think when W was ranked number 9 in 1993 and they beat number 4 Miami, it was a real, unreal crowd. The defining regular season win of the undefeated 93 season. Miami was still national power. Mountaineer Field was just electric that night. Jake Kelchner led that statement victory. Rodney Woodard, I don't know if people remember him, a fullback, had a touchdown. Robert Walker going down the left sideline. And that was significant because W finished the regular season 11-0. And it was just a really, really big game and another statement win for them. Some games that kind of just missed, I think. You could put them in either category. West Virginia beat number 3 Virginia Tech in 2003. And then one fun one was when in 1984, when West Virginia upset number 4 Boston College and Doug Flutie, and that was a really fun one. So that's my list. I'm sure you're going to agree with almost none of them, but I'm ready for your feedback.
So it's funny you say that because I'm looking at my list right now. And first and foremost, the route that you took of doing a fun list and a serious list, love that. So I'm gonna take it from that angle. I'm gonna do the games that I loved watching. Disclaimer: I am only 26 years old. Please do not yell into your phone. Why are you not picking this game? Why are you not picking this game? I am 26 years old. Okay. So, but as I've very well documented on this podcast before, I feel I have a very good grasp of the history of Mountaineer football. So here are my top 3 games that I have loved watching, that I have personally seen, whether it be on TV or in person. And I have to start here. Give me last season's game, overtime game against Pitt, 31-24. You scored 17 unanswered, and you come back and you win that game when a lot of people did not know where this team was going to be at the remainder of the season. You struggled with Robert Morris game 1. Then you lose on the road in Athens to Ohio. A lot of people were questioning the trajectory of where this team and this program under Coach Rodriguez was going to go in his second stint in Morgantown. That game, in my honest opinion, surpassed any loss that WVU suffered last season. Simply because, one, you beat Pitt, but two, Rodriguez got his redemption over Pitt. Because you think about it, the last time that the two teams met with Coach Rodriguez on the sideline was 2007 when they lost 13-9. So for him to win that game the way that they did, and I'll be very, very honest with you, Mitch. I was at that game, and I was actually doing the spotting for Tony Caridi, and I'm going to be honest with you. We have the win. During the fall and like the early portions of the fall, we always keep the windows open. Oh, my gosh. We had like a cup of water. I can't remember who had the cup of water, but someone had a cup of water, and I remember looking at it, and that thing was vibrating just from how loud that place got after Eli Holstein threw that pass that I don't know who he was throwing to. He might have pulled a Sam Darnold whenever Sam Darnold said he was seeing ghosts. But the way that team overcame that 10-point deficit in the fourth quarter, and then Nico Marchiol came back in and won that game and helped guide that team to a victory, that was one of the most fun games I have witnessed ever, whether it be as a media member, as a fan. That's up there. Number two, I love when this gets brought up too. I love the 2012 Baylor game against the Baylor Bears, Big 12 opener, first game in the conference, and just an absolute freaking just shootout. 70-63 the final. Geno Smith had video game-esque numbers, and we know the rest of the story. Only won 7 games that season, but how much fun that game was.
So did the other quarterback. So did Baylor's quarterback.
Yeah. Valid point too. But just the way that game ended up and the statistics that followed that as well, that's a game that, one, still gets talked about on social media by anybody. But I can remember just leaving Milan Puskar Stadium as a young fan and thinking, I just saw one of the greatest statistical football games of all time, period.
And if I could interject real quickly.
Yeah.
I remember after that game, I went up and the Baylor quarterback, and his name slips my memory, but I remember looking at him going, what do you think you'll look back on this in 20 years? How do you think you'll look back on this and think of this game? And he just looked at me and almost like shook his head and like, I don't know, man. I mean, he was just blown away, I think, like all of us were. But anyway, go ahead.
Nick Florence, by the way, 29 of 47 passing, 581 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. And I forgot that this guy was playing for Baylor. This guy was an absolute freaking dog for them. Terrence Williams, 17 receptions, 314 yards, 2 touchdowns. Hello. But, again, just Geno Smith's numbers. Only through 6 incompletions that whole game, 45 of 51, 656 through the air, 8 touchdowns. And then you had 2 guys, arguably 2 of the best receivers of all time in Mountaineer football history, in Stedman Bailey and Tavon Austin, combining for 7 of those 8 touchdowns, with the other one going to J.D. Woods. But both of them had over 200 yards receiving. Holy cow. That's up there. And then the other one that I've personally seen, now you gotta bear with me with this one. I don't remember as much of the 2000s as a lot of other people would my age. And I don't know why. I can tell you certain things about the games, but I can't remember vividly remembering a game. Like, I know the Louisville game's up there for many that kickstarted the whole Pat White, Steve Slayton phenomenon. Again, you mentioned the Virginia Tech game as well, and so on. But I want to go back. I think it was 2022. Yes, 2022. Oklahoma, WVU. WVU had not beaten, West Virginia had not beaten Oklahoma since joining the Big 12. Miserable weather game. Now, you got to understand where I'm at with this. I know Oklahoma sucked that season. They moved to 5-5 after this game. But you got to bear with me with this. And I know it was a really I don't really want to call it bad, but just it was a crappy day in regards to weather. The weather sucked, rained the whole time. I don't remember exactly the attendance for it necessarily, but I was intrigued at how many fans were there. Nonetheless, here's why I mentioned this game. So for people that know me personally, they know my background, and they know that I attended Bible Center Christian School in Charleston, okay? And the kicker for WVU at the time was Casey Legg. I have known Casey since kindergarten, and we went through college together. We would go out to eat often. We would hang out sometimes whenever he was available. The build-up to that field goal, again, I was in the radio booth with Tony Caridi and the MSN crew. The build-up to that kick and that ball going through the air, I kind of had a Sandlot moment. Whenever Benny the Jet Rodriguez hit that home run for the Dodgers and Smalls is up in the booth and he's calling the game, I kind of had that moment. But when that kick went in, that ball, first and foremost, felt like it took an hour to get to the goalpost. But that game is special to me just because of who kicked the game-winning field goal. So for that is one of my favorite games of all time. Now, my serious games, I know I've taken a little bit of time with this, but deservedly so. The serious games. You and I do have an agreement with this one. 93 Miami, whenever WVU was 9th and Miami was 4th. That is one of the most iconic wins in Mountaineer football history, in front of a record-breaking crowd with over 70,000 in attendance inside Milan Puskar Stadium. That has to be mentioned because just of the national relevance that Miami had in the 90s, and for WVU to beat them. WVU had actually lost 5 straight before that. I think their last one came in 1973, I believe. But winning that game against a top 5 program and also a program that was so prevalent in the 90s, that needs to be discussed. I took a different route. You mentioned Penn State in that 88 game against Penn State. I have Penn State on my list. However, I went a different year. I went 1984. And the reason I mentioned 84 was when we were talking with Brian Joswiak last week, and he was talking about that game, and you mentioned the victories. I said, that 84 Penn State game, it should definitely be on there in some capacity. I do agree with you, too. That 88 game against Penn State does deserve its roses, but I don't think they win the 88 game without winning in 84. You win that game by 3. You snap a 25-game losing streak against Penn State. That was also the game that they got Joe Paterno off the sidelines quicker than they ever could. So I love that game just in the standpoint of how relevant it is, how notable it is. And again, I think the 84 game, I think the 88 win would not have happened had they not won in 84. And you think about, like, Paterno legitimately had bodyguards, and when I mean bodyguards, he had his football players making a path for them, and that they tore down the goalpost, and all the fans rushed the field inside on Mountaineer Field. I think the 84 win over Penn State should definitely be mentioned. My third one, you mentioned the Sugar Bowl game, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was actually going to be one of my honorable mentions, but the one game that I chose, because I wanted to win in the Rich Rodriguez era, because he had so many iconic ones. You mentioned the Virginia Tech game, the Sugar Bowl game. But even though this was not in his tenure and he did not see this through as the head coach, I think the significance of the 2008 Oklahoma game will forever be discussed in Mountaineer football history. I think it might be top 3 all time. Because where that program was at going into that game, there were a lot of question marks as to how WVU would respond after losing the Pit, losing their national championship aspirations, and then losing their head coach on top of all of that. I think the historical significance of that game, and then Pat White went just stupid. He said, "Oh yeah, Sam Bradford, we're going to line up. We're going to beat you. We're going to beat the tar out of you." And then Owen Schmidt gave one of the better post-game interviews, but you talk about one of the most iconic speeches. I know so often we talk about most iconic speeches. You can go to the JFK inaugural address. You can go to the MLK I Have a Dream speech. I'll tell you what, Bill Stewart did not – he probably didn't write it down. He probably wrote it down. But regardless, that speech, as the kids say nowadays, GOAT. By far, GOAT. And you think, again, the historical significance of that game and winning the game that you did against an Oklahoma team that had a Heisman-winning quarterback in Sam Bradford. That game, to me, I remember watching this game too in my at home. The significance of that game will forever be mentioned in Mountaineer football history. So again, 84 Penn State, 93 Miami, 08 Oklahoma. That's what I got.
Yep. Okay. And two things. One, you're right, that 84, that was the final game. I misspoke there. But two, you were talking about the situation with WVU after the 13-9 Pitt loss. And I was right in the middle of all that. I mean, and I can tell you, it was like, and I hate like hyperbole, like going overboard, but it was sort of like a bomb had gone off in the program. I mean, I was out there and it was just like a pall had been cast over the W program after the loss and Rodriguez going, and it was just like everybody's was just droopy, and it looked like, you know, they were going to a funeral instead of the Fiesta Bowl. And that, the response, and like you said, Bill Stewart's speech and all of that, and I think that speech actually got him the job, to be honest with you, because I remember Eddie passed along and Joe Manchin and they pretty much got together, you know, after that victory, and that's how he got the job. I remember being in my room out there, and I had, you know, 6 a.m. flight out in the morning, and they were like, yeah, we've got a 10 a.m. Press conference to announce our new coach. And I'm like, what? I can't make that, you know. And so, but I got a call at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I remember calling Doc Holliday at 2 o'clock because he was one of the ones that was, you know, up for the job. And I said, Doc, did you get it? And he goes, no. And I said, well, they've called a press conference for tomorrow. And he didn't say anything for a minute, and then he said, they gave it to Billy. And so it was just, like you said, it was like unbelievable, and the bounce back was definitely one to remember for forever and ever.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. That game in particular, I think it's hard in a lot of ways to talk about that, just because those that remember that time period specifically, with going through the years of Rich Rodriguez and everything, to see that team win the way that they did, I think is just, again, I'll mention this until I die, is just the prevalence of that game, the historical aspect of that as well, and the importance of that game as well, are just things that just make that game even more special despite the final score. So I think that 08 game will forever be immortalized as one of the greatest games of all time. Well, Mitch, we appreciate your time. Great insight. Love this discussion with you. I love the fact that you went both ways with serious and fun. So good discussion, good topics all around, good historical context as well, going back to that 08 season, 07-08 season. So appreciate you and look forward to chatting with you next week.
All right, buddy. Always enjoy it.
Yep.
Talk to you next week.
Yep, absolutely.
Bye-bye.
There he is, Mitch Vingle, former Charleston Gazette-Mail sports editor. Appreciate his time as always. You can find him on social media. Link for that is in the description, along with my social media handle and all of our other social media pages, and Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, everything as well. We will see you all next week for the newest edition of the All Ears podcast as we continue along this off-season interview series, and we'll talk more with former Mountaineers or maybe even some current Mountaineers down the line. This is the All Ears Podcast.
You have been listening to the All Ears Podcast, powered by HD Media.